This is New Orleans, known for its vibrant nightlife, southern cuisine, and susceptibility to flooding. After the truly appalling devastation of Hurricane Katrina, the $15 billion Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction System was put into effect, but latest studies show that it won't be enough for long. So, just how long does New Orleans have left? From the off, flooding was a known issue. As such, the initial French settlement in 1718 was located on the relatively high ground of the natural levee, created by a sharp bend in the Mississippi River. But why is it so susceptible to flooding? Well, the city is sandwiched between the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. The Mississippi River drains water from 32 American states and 2 Canadian provinces. It averages at a flow rate of 17,000 cubic meters per second. That is the equivalent of nearly 7 Olympic-sized swimming pools. Lake Pontchartrain to the north of the city is the next issue. As hurricanes move in from the Atlantic Ocean, their strong winds can push water from the Gulf of Mexico into the lake. This rapid influx of water is called a storm surge. Two rather powerful sources of water, in close proximity to the city, is a substantial threat. But if that was the end of it, things probably wouldn't be so bad. Unfortunately, there's more. The initial settlement was on relatively high ground, but as New Orleans has continued to grow, more and more land that is below sea level has been developed upon. This has led to roughly half of the city being below sea level. Worse still, some of the areas that were originally above sea level aren't anymore. A lot of the land that is below sea level was originally swampy wetlands, which have been drained to allow for development. As the groundwater has been pumped out, the underlying soil is desiccated and compacted, which leads to the ground level sinking. According to a 2016 NASA study using airborne radar mapping, parts of New Orleans are sinking by as much as 5 centimeters per year. So land that was already low-lying is sinking even further and is continuing to be developed. This really is a recipe for disaster. Unfortunately, that's not all. As well as sinking ground, we have rising sea levels. Over the past century, New Orleans has seen sea level rises of half a meter. These will continue at a rate of approximately 5.3 millimeters per year. That doesn't sound a lot, but when so much of the city is hovering within inches of sea level, it becomes a larger problem. The sea level rise is in no small part due to climate change. But as well as rising seas, climate change can bring differences in how tropical storms act and propagate. As sea surface temperatures continue to rise, storms will increase in both size and severity. On the 29th of August 2005, whilst 80% of New Orleans was under up to 3 meters of water, the rest of the world looked on in horror. The chaos of it all has meant that even today we don't know exactly how many lives it claimed, nor has there been a consensus on what counts as a Katrina-related death. Counts range from 986 up to 4,000. The damage caused by the storm is a little more simple to estimate, at around $150 billion. Storm surges reached as high as 8.5 meters in places, and caused over 50 breaches in the city's flood defences. The vast majority of these breaches were caused by overtopping and the subsequent erosion of the supporting material. Essentially, the water came over the top of the levee and then washed away the supporting soil behind them. A smaller, but unfortunately more consequential number of breaches happened without any form of overtopping, and significantly below design specifications. Both the 17th Street and London Avenue Canal defences were found to have had their support not driven into the ground to appropriate depths. The root cause of this mistake was due to a misinterpreted test of the stability of the underlying ground. 5.1 metre long supports were used. However, if the test had been correctly interpreted, these supports would have been up to 14 metres in length. As part of the $15 billion protection programme, the levees and flood walls have been strengthened, with deeper pilings plunged into the earth to keep them standing, along with concrete reinforcement to lessen erosion if they are overtopped. As well as upgrading the levees, new defences have been constructed, such as the lake-borne surge barrier and the Seagate floodgate complex. Working with the various physical barriers are 78 pump stations, including the world's largest drainage pump station, the Gulf Intracoastal Waterway West Closure Complex. Catchy. All of these flood defence improvements must help to make residents feel more protected. So is there any reason for people to be worried? The hurricane defences were designed and funded on the basis that they would provide adequate protection for a 100-year storm. That is a storm that has a 1% chance of occurring per year, or put it another way, a storm expected to hit every 100 years. Unfortunately, according to the Army Corps of Engineering, from as early as 2023, that will no longer be the case. This is apparently due to a mixture of subsidence under the protective levees and the alarming sea level rises that we are seeing. The increased risk of loss of life is the obvious concerning takeaway from this, but there is another, less apparent, consequence of this information. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, administrate a federally subsidised flood insurance plan. Homeowners in flood zones are generally not able to purchase private flood insurance. However, they are able to purchase the federal flood insurance. The problem arises, however, that if the flood defences are no longer adequate to guard against a 100-year storm, then the area will no longer be eligible for the National Flood Programme, effectively leaving New Orleans uninsured in the face of future flooding. So, just how much under this 100-year yardstick are we looking at? According to one storm surge expert, we could be looking at the 1% chance being raised to a 5% chance. Or to put it another way, a storm severe enough to breach New Orleans' defences every 20 years. Plans have been proposed for stronger steel defences. That would go towards keeping under the all-important 100-year mark, but with a price tag of around $50 billion. Unfortunately for New Orleans, it is not the only place in Louisiana, or even the rest of America, that is battling for funds to protect itself against flooding. Places like New York and Miami are vying for funding for their own flood protections, along with a whole host of smaller cities and towns. The cost of climate change is really starting to bite, and there's no easy solution for anyone, least of all New Orleans. If you liked the video, perhaps consider subscribing.